Hey.
Hey,
All right. So, welcome everybody to another day of 21 days of self care. We are pretty much at the end. Thank you for journeying with us this whole time. And today I have my favorite human on the planet here with me, Calvin. How are you doing?
I'm doing excellent.
Great.
Can't complain. The weather's good.
The weather's wonderful. That's true. So, Calvin, tell us a little bit about you and your love for gardening.
Correct. Oh, thank you very much. So, I'm Calvin, as you know. So, I was born in India and I grew up there for about 10.5 years. And while I was there from a young child, it was great. I mean, growing in a tropical land, I would just grow up and I would see the cashew trees over there, the mango trees, the papaya trees. What else could you ask for?
It sounds wonderful.
Yeah. Furthermore, I had my ancestral property for my ancestors in a city called Mangalore.
Mm.
And I did not live there, but we would visit there every year. And when I went there, my grandfather and my granduncle, they grew so much fruit trees, and some of these trees were there from even the generations before. So they had
Mm.
mango trees, coconut trees, papayas, you name it. And I think from a young age, I would always go around the yard. I'll be very curious about why things were put the way they are. Why was the land sloped the way they are? Why did the water go in a certain way? There was always a reason for something, I would
Mm.
presume. And I would also enjoy walking with my grandfather and my dad in the morning, just walking around the yard. And if there were any fruits to pick up, like the mangoes and so on and so forth, I would enjoy that activity as well.
That sounds great. I mean, it sounds like a tropical paradise. So I think most of us would love gardening if we grew up in a tropical paradise and could just walk and pick mangoes with our families and all of these wonderful things you described. How
Hmm.
does that translate here in Canada, which is
Yes.
not so tropical?
Well, even though it's not tropical, I think the way nature is, opportunities abound everywhere.
Mm.
So even though there are a lot of the tropical fruits in the tropical lands like India, when I came to Canada, there are a lot other great fruit trees over here, like the berries. You got the raspberries.
Right?
So I'm right now in a food forest in a garden right now, and you're not able to see this, but there are raspberries right in front of me, and that's very exciting. So there are raspberries, there are strawberries. So our
Right.
our yard literally has wild strawberries growing right in front of us. So the way I see it, there's a lot of abundance over here. It's a
Mm.
matter of perception, and we have to be able to observe and see where these things are.
Okay.
And right when I came to Canada, I mean, within the first couple of years, my parents got a house,
Mm-hmm.
and well, what did they do? They right away started gardening. So we grew some of the plants from back home, so we were able to
Mm.
grow some of that food. But we were
That's
able to
wonderful.
grow the normal vegetables that we get from the Loblaws stores and from the Parkdale market where we would go to get our food. I mean, our plants. So we did a lot of that as well. And I mean, I learned a lot even in my teenage years about how to grow the vegetables, how to get a great yield, and so on and so forth.
So even as a teenager, you were gardening here in Canada.
Correct.
That's really
Correct.
cool. And so you've had like decades literally of experience.
Yes, I've had decades of experience. However, when I went to university, I started getting very busy, and
Right?
that was a time where I stopped gardening less, for various reasons. And I ended up going to engineering. And when I did that, I went to Toronto for a few years, and that's the time where I did not really. That was a part of my life where I did not really partake much in that, and it was a time where I guess I kind of forgot, and I did take food for granted, and so on and
Right.
so forth.
Just picked
And
it up at the store
yeah,
like
I
everybody else.
exactly. I moved on to other things, right? And whenever I wanted something, I would go to the store and get it.
So how does buying food from the store and picking food from the ground, how does it differ? Can you explain that? Like what's the difference?
Yes, in several ways, but I'll explain the most important things, the
Mm.
nutrition that you get.
Mm.
So a lot of the things, for example, in the store, they're not locally grown. They come
Right.
from the US, Mexico. So in order for them to come over here, they've got to travel long distances.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, when they travel long distances and the processes that are used to preserve this food, obviously it's not going to be as healthy as
Right.
it is right from your backyard.
Right.
Second of all, I think the difference, at least for me, was obvious: the satisfaction, the
Mm,
satisfaction of growing your own food and
yes.
being able to like get the food yourself. It's like, wow, I planted this thing and it's grown, and now I'm actually reaping the success of what I've sown.
Okay. So basically, nutrients and satisfaction.
Correct.
That's wonderful. And then in terms of, when it comes to growing, a lot of people are like, oh, it just seems like a lot of work.
Hmm.
What are the easiest plants to grow?
The easiest plants. Well, there are a few. I mean, you can, if you do have a little bit of a bigger yard and you do not mind, you know, food growing and taking over. I mean, mint is an easy one to do.
Mint, okay.
Mint will just grow like no tomorrow. Oregano, some of those herbs like
Herbs,
that.
okay.
Thyme is very easy. Those things just spread by the roots. And
Lovely.
so the opportunities are endless over there. But if you want to do vegetables that you have to plant every spring,
Mm-hmm.
I think one easy one is cabbage.
Okay.
Tomatoes is very popular. I mean, now that it's summer, everywhere you go, you're going to see people growing tomatoes. So that's another one. I feel peas, like we have over there, maybe you cannot see, but peas are very easy to grow. Beans as well. You
Right.
get a good yield from those. Kale is an awesome one. I mean, it's an excellent food to eat. That's something that I love eating when it comes up, so that I can so that I can enjoy it with other things like making a smoothie and so on and so forth. So
Right.
those
So
are the
those are all fairly easy. Tomatoes,
yes,
cabbage, kale. That's a pretty
yes,
decent variety. And then of course the herbs, like you said, which
of
will just take
course.
over.
And
And then you don't have to plant those every year.
no, you will need to plant, because certain herbs you do need to plant because
Right.
they are from warmer climates.
Right.
But
Like
some
which
of them,
ones?
like basil.
Basil.
Basil
Okay.
would be a great example.
Right.
But then there are other families that have come from those kind of climates that have a greater hardiness, like oregano. So
Right.
oregano you can
Plant it
grow
once and
most of them.
yeah.
Yes. So one has to, whenever you buy a plant, you need to look at the hardiness of the zone.
Mm-hmm.
So right now in Ottawa, we're looking at what they would probably call zone 4 or 4B.
Okay.
So you need to always get a plant rated at your zone or lesser.
Okay. Okay. That makes a lot of sense. And then that just determines its resilience and
Correct.
sustainability in your
Correct.
region.
Exactly.
But you can still grow tropical plants like sweet potatoes and stuff.
Yes, absolutely. You can grow sweet potatoes. However, if you are in Eastern Ontario and Ottawa, where we are, the growing season is much lesser. So you need to pick a stronger variety that can get you the yield faster.
Right.
Because if a sweet potato, for example, will take 120 days to grow,
Mm-hmm.
you are really cutting into the growing season. So your sweet potatoes, when you pick them, if they're ever successful, they will not be as big.
Okay.
But if you're somewhere else, like maybe Southern Ontario, you can get another 10, 15 days. So that's pretty good. So you could grow maybe that kind of sweet potato over there or further down into the US.
Okay. So if you had like 1 to 3 secrets of growing, if I made you write a book called Secrets of Growing in Ottawa or in Ontario, what would be your top 3 secrets?
Okay, so I'm not going to limit it to one region. I'm going to limit it
Oh,
globally.
globally.
So
Okay, I
I would
love
like
this.
to impart with you guys a couple principles. So the first one is observation.
Okay.
It is very important, I think, for
Yes.
a person to be able to observe the way nature works.
Mm,
So the philosophical pattern, I mean the philosophical idea over here is to observe the patterns in order to design the patterns into the reality of what you want to build.
okay.
So that's a very, very important part of it.
It's like biomimicry.
Yes, biomimicry.
Okay.
And with that, you also want to know the amount of hours you get of sunlight, because each region, some places get more rain, some places get more sun. So it's important to know how much sun you get.
Mm-hmm.
And then it's important to know where your north, south, east, and west is. That's
Right.
another very important principle to know.
Yeah.
Why? Because in the summer, you want to take advantage of the south-facing sun.
Mm-hmm.
So you're not going to plant a plant north of a building, because the building's going to block
Right.
the sun from coming
Right.
to your plant.
Yes.
So knowing your north, south, east, and west is very important. The third important thing is to understand how much rain you get,
Mm,
because water is huge. Water is what you're going to know, what you're going to need to know in order for your plants to grow. So, sunlight and water. And you want to use those principles and optimize your design in order to make the sun and the water work for you. In other words, the whole trick over here is you want nature to work with you, not against you.
I love that. I love that. So it's basically optimization so
Exactly.
that you're doing less work over time. Even if you might be doing a little bit more work initially to plan everything out, it just means that over time it's easier.
Exactly.
Okay?
It's all about strategy.
All about strategy. I love that. So now I'm going to ask you to define self-care. So I know that gardening is a big part of your self-care, but how would you define self-care to you?
To me, self care is, first of all, understanding that when you give back to care for others, like in gardening, there are two principles that I talk about: earth care and people care.
Mm,
I believe that when you take care of the earth takes care of you.
mm,
So as much as we want to take care of ourselves, we need to believe that here on earth, there's more than enough for us to be sustained, at least in the food sector.
right.
And so I believe that when we work on ourselves and we actually use that energy to give back, not only to others, but in my
To
emphasis,
nature.
back to nature,
Right.
back to the earth,
Yes.
we need to have that gratefulness. And I think when we operate on gratefulness from where the bounty comes from, it will further improve ourselves.
I like that. So you see caring for nature as self-care on the level of the fact that nature is actually taking care of you through the bounty that comes out of it.
Yes.
Okay, what other aspects of gardening fuels your self-care? What else do you love about it in terms of your personal well-being?
Yes, for me, I mean, I think getting exercise is a great thing.
Yes.
So sometimes, we're always busy at work and so on and so forth. But I
Yeah.
feel if I'm not doing something a lot that day, I can go to my garden and I can work on it.
Yes.
So I'm able to exercise different parts of my body when I go
Right,
outside.
that's
So
true.
that's a big part of
My
me.
favorite part to exercise is the harvesting muscles.
That's right. So I think that would be an example.
Okay, so exercise, the harvest, all of
Mhm.
that stuff is all part of the self-care.
Correct.
And I know that, because, we're married and all, I know that people often say to you, Calvin, why don't you start selling food from your garden? You have so much food.
Correct.
And you often have a response. So tell me a little bit more about what is your goal? What's your dream? What's your vision with
Yes.
gardening?
So when it comes to earth care and people care, let me just focus on people care. I
Yes.
believe the best way to solve a lot of our problems, especially our food problems, is by empowering people.
Yes.
And so when a lot of people ask me if I'm going to sell, I think it is more efficient for me to train a person how to grow their food rather than me grow the food for them. Because if I'm one hand that's trying to feed 60 other people, if I can even train half of them to grow the food, I think it'll be a lot more efficient.
Right. So you're more into empowering and coaching, consulting.
Exactly.
Excellent. So through that, how do you move people from being complete novices, not knowing what they're doing, into an empowered gardener? What's your process?
My process is, first we need to start with what we have.
Yes.
We need to start in humble places.
Okay.
So when we got our yard,
Yes.
we had space. However, I chose to make a 4 feet by 4 feet garden. So I started with 4 feet by 4 feet. Now
Yes.
that's even after having experienced gardening before.
Yes, yes,
And
yes.
this was something that I got back into, by the way, during the COVID period.
Right.
When I had more free time to think and so on and so forth, when the world came to a little bit of a pause, I was able to reflect and I was able to observe.
Right.
And so what I decided to do was I made a 4 feet by 4 feet property, and you wouldn't believe the yields I got. For example, I got over 100 tomatoes.
Wow.
I got a lot of greens, such as Swiss chard, which, by the way, is another easy vegetable to grow, and cabbage as well, and even zucchini. Got quite a bit of zucchini and radishes and so on and so forth. So the way I'm going to approach people, I'm going to come to where they're at.
Yeah.
And if they do not have any experience at all, I do want them to start with a little bit, maybe even a 2 by 2. You could start with a 2 feet by 2 feet or 4
on a
feet.
balcony or something.
Exactly.
Yeah.
There are ways to do it in the balcony. So there are certain tricks, for example, that you can trick the plants to think that they're being pollinated by bees, and
Okay.
you could still get your fruit. So there are ways to do this, and I would like to impart that. Also, I feel what I would do with people when I start small, I want to teach them how plants need to work together. There needs to be more collaboration rather than being competitive. So a
Yes.
lot of times, plants will try to survive by the fittest. But what
Right.
I want to do is when I plant a tomato, for example, I want a plant that's going to work with the tomato rather
Right.
than against it,
Right.
so that when a pest comes towards the tomato, the pest will think twice because the other ally of the tomato is going to work in repelling that pest.
I love that.
So my goal is to teach the principles for the people
Right.
starting small.
Starting
Once
small.
they're able to master that,
Yes.
then we can go into bigger projects like permaculture and food forestry, which by the way I'm working at um, in my own yard personally.
Right. That makes a lot of sense. So start small. That's been a
Correct.
theme in this 21 days of self-care. And I
Mm-hmm.
love what you talked about, like the pairing the plants together, kind of companion planting, which is kind of
Mm-hmm.
a theme that has also come up. It's community. So it's like
Correct.
community for plants. You're
Correct.
building community within the plants to protect them and all of that stuff.
Correct.
That's
Just
wonderful.
like human beings.
Just like humans. So they're a lot like us.
Yes, plants have relationships with each other, and they have relationships with us, and that's how we're tied together with the world,
With
the whole
nature,
ecosystem.
creation, all the good stuff. Okay,
Exactly.
Calvin. So I have one last question for you. Since it is the end of the video, what is your favorite thing about being part of TC Wellness?
Well, first of all, my favorite part of it is obviously working with you and also getting to know the amazing community around. Like, I think it's, me getting to know others and others getting to know me. And it's been a real life experience at TC Wellness. Also, while I focus more on the healthy part of growing, I've been able to understand better about therapeutic products, something that I
Yes.
took for granted before.
Mm.
So now I do not take compression socks for granted. They are so incredibly important for everyone. And I think when it comes to self care, it's also a very holistic thing. A lot of times you want to focus on one thing, but we need to understand that our body operates like an ecosystem.
Yes.
So
yes.
eating healthy is one thing,
Mhm.
but making sure you have good compression socks is another thing
I
altogether.
love that. Calvin is our favorite salesman. But yeah, thank you so much for being here. Is there any last thing you want to sneak in? I know we're officially out of time, but it's our last official interview. So is there anything else that I haven't asked you about that you just are dying to share?
I think I would just like to harp on everything that all the guests have talked about, that we need to start with one little thing at a time during the day. Give a few minutes for that. And what I would add to it is master it, and then you can graduate more.
I love that. So don't try to take on too many things at once. Don't try to change everything. Change one thing.
Correct.
Master it, then stack on the next thing.
You got it.
That sounds like a wonderful note to end. Thank you so much, all of you, for being part of this amazing journey. This has been transformative for me as well. The next video is basically lessons learned through 21 days of self-care for me. And it's been wonderful having the amazing guests who are passionate about all kinds of amazing things. And of course, this one over here, I just had to save him for last, of course. So thank you once again, and have a wonderful rest
Wishing you a
of
great
your
evening.
evening. Bye.